a fairly senior level job with a boss who I considered a mentor, and she became, a great friend. And I just noticed that there were some changes in how she was being treated at the workplace. Not invited to certain meetings. I happened to be at a work cocktail party with the CEO, who was her boss, and said something to him about it. I said, I notice, this just feels a little bit off. What's going on? What can I do to help her? The first thing he said was, well, Patty, don't you see that could be good for you?
And we are back. You listen to the Omi Show. I am Omi Bell. And this week, we are welcoming PR guru and author Patty Temple Rocks to the show. She is the author of I'm Still Not Done, a book about ageism in the workplace. Patty first got her first writing assignment 4 decades ago at Dow Chemical. You know what? That's even terrible the way I said that. I'm going to say that listen, I love that we're going to have this conversation about ageism, entrepreneurship, business, and all these things, because we have to be mindful of how we even talk about, quote unquote, a long time ago. So let me just bring Patty in here. We'll just jump right in, because I had to catch myself when I said 4 decades ago. In my mind, I'm saying it because I honor this amount of time put in. At the same time, I should be mindful of that sounding like I'm saying that's old. I think those are things that, okay, so we about to jump right in. Welcome to the show, Patty.
Thank you so much. And honestly, I love that you honor that. And I wish I could take credit, but I can't. Somebody started a hashtag a while ago called Say Your Age. And I do think that it is important that, I'm a better person because I've been working for 4 decades. I'm a more valuable person to anybody I'm trying to help because of that. So the last thing that I want to do is hide behind it. And unfortunately, too many people do, because they're afraid that people will dismiss them for job opportunities or any opportunities. Oh, she's old or he's old or whatever. So I'm with you, and let's just be proud and say these things out loud about how old we are. I'm 63. So
beautiful.
Yeah. Happy to share it.
Beautiful. And okay, so this is where we always start, because I was about to jump into another question, but let me back up so I can give some foundation. So let's take it a step back. You could be doing anything in the world. So you have a beautiful guitar behind you. So you could be in a rock band, okay? And maybe you were at some point. I don't know. We'll get into that. You could be, I always say, selling the 7 C's, rock climbing. You could be running a farm in a foreign country. You could be doing anything you want. Why did you decide on this career with Dow Chemical, and then deciding on PR, helping founders, like working with businesses? Where does all this come from?
Well, I'm lucky. I love what I've done. I love how I've spent the last 40 years, and including the fact that it's had, twists and turns and shifts along the way. I think that I started doing what I was doing because, like a lot of people, right at their, in their early ages, I went on a traditional path, right? I did not understand that there might be options to me other than get a job, and try to get that first job. Now, it's true what they say about if you get a job that you love, it never feels like work. I feel that way. Like working in marketing and PR has just allowed me to travel the world and sort of, do all of these great things. So I think that how it's done that for me is because I've just always viewed it as not as this static career. This is what I'm doing, and this is what I shall do forever, but more like, let's just kind of see where it takes me. So, would I have loved to, at 21 years old, say, I'm going to travel the world and, collect original art? Sure. But we got to pay those bills and get a job and all the rest of that. So I think that the real secret for me anyway has just been to kind of find ways to try to do it all along the way. Like do my thing, do my traditional job, but be open. I didn't choose to write about ageism. It wasn't even on my horizon of something I was aware of 10 years ago. But then things happened and it just sort of became a calling. And it was like, I have to do this. This is what I have to do now. So
I love that. One of the things that you said I want to dig into a little bit is like traditional path and then like doing everything I want to do. Because for a lot of our listeners and a lot of people out there, they've been told, and I'm one of them, just do one thing. You're doing too much. You just need to do one thing. And so I tell people all the time, you can do everything you want to do, but you may have to do them at certain increments. And so you're multi hyphenated in all the things you have accomplished, right? And just like it's really intriguing. How did you pace? Okay, I'm going to be a consultant. Okay, I'm going to do PR. Okay, I'm going to help launch businesses. Okay, I'm going to train businesses. Like over the course of your career, and did you give a certain amount of time? Because when I talk about my journey with BGV, I said I was going to give it 3 months. If it didn't take off in 3 months, I was done with it, and it took off. Did you have any types of those moments where you're like, I should keep doing this, don't do that?
yeah, sure. I mean, it's never been just a single clear straight line, I think, for me anyway. But I think it kind of goes back, and it was interesting we say you can do all these things. My mother said to me when I was young, and she was a traditional, 50s, got married in the 50s, had her first, I was born in the, at the end of that decade, but it was different. Times were different then. And so watching me, sort of have a career and make these choices was not something, it was just different for her. And so she said, I've been watching you, and I think maybe the truth is that you can have it all, just not all at once. And I hang on to that because I think that's really true. Like you can, you just have to be flexible. And I know when I was younger and patient, and I know when I was younger, everybody loves to give you the advice, just do a good job at this job and your next job will come to you, as opposed to being like overly mindful of what do I have to do to get promoted or what do I have to do to make this next thing. And that's really hard for a type A personality because you just think I want to control this and I'm going to try to do this so that this happens. And I take nothing away from people who are that specific and goal oriented because I think that can be very helpful. But in my life, I have just found sort of being open to what happens. And so it may be like I had, you've always been told you should never stay in a job for less than a year. It looks really bad in your resume. You've got to stick it out for at least a year. And then, I one time had a job that was like 4 months and I knew this isn't right. This isn't a fit. And then sure enough, the right door opened that made far more sense for me. And, and so I took it. But I think it's like, the old shit happens, expression. Somebody once rephrased it to me and said, shift happens, put the big F in the shit happens. And it's like, so shift a little bit and go here or there. And, if we are so set that this is my path and I will stay on it, then I think you miss a lot of opportunities that for me have turned out to be sort of life-changing.
What would you say is the pivot moment though? Like how should entrepreneurs or founders, how should they be thinking about the moment it is like are there certain characteristics that you've seen that are like, this is time to let this thing go and move on to this other thing?
Yeah, I think, we all have intuition, right? And gut. And we all have something that's sort of saying, this just doesn't feel quite right. I'm not sure that this is going to end the way that I want it to. I do advise people. So in spite of what I said about like not being super rigid, I do, advise when I'm talking to younger people, like give yourself a check-in date where it's like, I really don't like how I'm feeling right now, whether it's about the success of this venture, the way my boss is treating me, whether I like this company, but maybe it's a moment that will pass, or maybe I can try to do these other things that will be different, but I'm going to set a date and everybody sort of knows their own timeline. I think it's usually, 6 months down the road where if I still feel this way, I'm going to honor that feeling and make the change and get out or, make a change or whatever. But I think that, just like it's wrong to make a decision in the moment when you're feeling stressed or, anxious about something, it's also wrong to just never make a decision because then that stress and anxiety builds and builds and builds. And then all of a sudden you've spent, 10 years in something bad, whether it's a relationship or a job or anything else.
No, 100%. So your book, Still Not Done, which is about ageism. I love that. How old? Well, if you don't mind me asking,
no.
How old were you when you decided to write it? Because you're still young.
Yeah, I'll go back even a little bit further. I'll tell you sort of where I was in my career when I first noticed it, and that was, and I'm, was like a lot of people, I think, oblivious to ageism. I didn't know it existed. If I was practicing it or behaving in that way, I was unaware. It's just like any other sort of unconscious bias. And for me, I was in a fairly senior level job with a boss who I considered a mentor, and she became, a great friend. And I just noticed that there were some changes in how she was being treated at the workplace. Not invited to certain meetings, just weird little things that my spidey sense said, didn't feel right. And I happened to be at a work cocktail party with the CEO, who was her boss, and said something to him about it. I said, I notice, this just feels a little bit off. What's going on, and what can I do to help her? And his reaction, honestly, is what set this journey in place for me, because the first thing he said was, well, Patty, don't you see that could be good for you? And of course, and I don't know you well at all, but I'm sure you're the same as me. I never want my success as a woman to be because somebody else had to be forced out of my way for that,
Right.
So that set me off. But then the second thing he said just confused me, because he said, and she's been with the company a long, long time. I think she's just tired. And I knew this person, as I said, she had become a good friend of mine, was a mentor. She was never tired a day in her life. She was not tired. And so I just started to wonder what's really going on here. And then, over time, I just saw the marginalization, which is a huge red flag for ageism, happening more. She ended up, I'm thrilled to say, is just fine. She ended up leaving the company, got immediately on a couple boards, and was doing great. But that was when I first thought, I think it was her age that had something to do with this, and she was only like 55 or something at the time. But that's when I just realized that business world had this bias against older workers, or just this assumption that we would hit a certain age and be ready to go, ready to say, I'm done. I don't really want to do this anymore. This has been great. Thank you for my gold watch. I'll just mosey on down the road. This was still before the book, though. This was a good 5 years, I think, before I thought about writing about it. And then my reaction to what happened to her was a little bit of a self-preservation thing, because I thought, I got to make sure this doesn't happen to me. And what are the signs, and what would I do next if that happened? And at the time, anything that I could read and find about this problem was strictly putting the problem on my lap. Reinvent yourself. Figure out what you are going to do when the business world decides that you're too old. And so maybe you want to go volunteer your time, or maybe you've always had a passion to garden and you're going to go open a garden center. It was just this accepting of sort of the status quo, that the business world gets to decide when you're done. And I'm embarrassed to say, at the time, I didn't even realize quite how wrong that was until it did kind of happen to me. And I was in a situation where, I wasn't forced out. I was definitely felt marginalized. I felt put into a role that wasn't going to be as meaty or meaningful as what I've been doing. And it was at that moment and then my then boss, who's a wonderful human being, but he said to me, well, how much longer do you want to work anyway? And there it was, staring me in the face. At this point, I'm 55, I think, or 56. I can't remember. I have no intention of retiring anytime soon, but he has subconsciously or consciously, I don't know, bought into this myth that that there's a static number that we all hit, and it's like time to move on. And so that's when I knew that's what I was going to do next, actually, was write and talk about ageism, because I thought, if it's happening to me, it happened to me when I was at the top of my game, it's happening to other people. And I just started interviewing and talking to people, and I found out that it was way more than me that was being influenced and impacted, rather, by this problem. So that's when I wrote my first book, I'm Not Done, which came out in 2019. So since then, I've been doing lots of things, but have not lost my passion for talking about ageism, which is partly why I wrote the second book.
So what age is that? What age is that when the workplace starts doing it, you think? And then based on your experience, what is it when your family starts doing it? Right? I mean, to the little kid, you're like, oh, you're so old.
Yeah.
But like, where do you think the age hits when people start experiencing it?
Well, people have reported it as early as like 40. And the legislation that exists to protect people from age discrimination does start at 40. Most people, the majority of it seems to sort of happen in the 50s. And, that is a bigger problem than it used to be, quite honestly, because we're all living a lot longer. And so when, 20, 30 years ago, life expectancy, unfortunately, given pandemic and violence, for the first time, 2 years has gone in the wrong direction for the last 2 years. But up until then, it had just been steadily increasing. So that the thought of retiring at 55, which was the standard age for a lot of companies, if you were going to potentially pass away in your early 70s, there's a time frame there that you think, well, maybe I do want to go do these other things or whatever. And there's also a very huge practical reality, which was when we were not living into our 90s. Your cost to take care of yourself or your family from your 55 to 70 is very different than from your 55 to 90. So most Americans, frankly, can't afford to retire in their 50s. They need to keep working well into their 60s. So, whether it's a desire, which I think it is for many of us, or a need, older workers need to keep being given the opportunity to work. And, you mentioned family and youth. It was sort of goes back to our first conversation about, talking about age. I think, I was raised to think that it was rude to ask somebody, especially a woman, how old they were. Well, you don't ask that question, And I was also raised professionally to, be told you never talk about money. You don't ask somebody how much money they make. Well, I wonder if we had, reverse engineered and had honest conversations. Like if I'm working side by side, same experience, same job with a man in the 80s, which was when I started my career, and I had not been told I couldn't ask him how much money I made, he made. If I was asking that question and I found we're friends, he's going to tell me, and I found out he's making thousands of dollars more, $1,000. It doesn't matter. Like maybe the whole, Me Too fair wage thing would have been blown up and wouldn't have taken 40 years, however many years it took to sort of blow up. So I do believe that we just have to make it okay, whether it's at home or at work, to talk about age. And it's a gift to every year that we're older is a gift that we're still living and on the planet and get to do more things. So, this sort of shame that's come with age, and you see it in the card aisle, as early as over the hill cards when you're 40 and, that kind of stuff. It's like, let's change the narrative around that. Not that we can't all have a good laugh about some of these things. I'm not saying let's lose our sense of humor, but, maybe we just sort of need to check ourselves on some of that.
So you've had a very lively PR career with some great companies and great people. And you served as the chief reputation officer for Leo Burnett. I don't even know that I knew that I needed to hire a chief reputation officer. Right. So, when I see CRO, I'm usually looking at a chief resource officer, maybe even research. But in this case, chief reputation officer. What should business owners be thinking about when they're thinking about as they're like planning out what their reputation might mean? Have we shifted from branding to reputation to branding? Because if you've seen the industry evolve, what has that evolution been like in terms of like once upon a time they was calling it just marketing, now they're calling it branding, now then it was
for sure. Yeah, I think they're inextricably related, brand and reputation. But the way, and I do think that every entrepreneur and every company, and frankly, every human should be thinking about their reputation and their brand, you know? And so, you know, you're in a business, I'm in a business where, you know, our personal brand matters, sort of like what we put out there, how we want to be perceived, etc. But it can all disappear in a nanosecond if we behave or do something that is in conflict with what we want to say about our brand. And that's what reputation is. And so I can say that, you know, my personal brand is I try to be interesting and, you know, transparent and fun. You know, I want people to feel like they can talk to me because of those things. But then you invite me to your show and I'm rude and show up late and I'm only willing to talk about my book, then you're going to say, well, Patty's brand is supposed to be this, but I found her to be this. That's what reputation is. And so there's a little bit of, you know, being like the little cop, you know, in a way that's sort of evaluating a person and a company to make sure that what we're actually doing is consistent with what we're saying. At Leo Burnett, I learned from somebody that had been there a long time that some advice that I've repeated dozens and dozens of times. And they say, if you're really trying to figure out what a company is all about, turn down the volume and just watch the movie. And, you know, that's just another way of saying, you know, actions speak louder than words. And so I can sit there and listen to the CEO, you know, wax philosophical about commitment to DE&I. And then I can look around and see, is this really a commitment or is this, you know, are these words? And words can be fine as long as there's if, you know, no one is perfect. And so the words might be like, we want to become this. And then you got to give people a chance and all the rest of that. But it's really about, that's to me, the difference between reputation and brand.
I love that. Thank you so much. And it's kind of like brand is what appears to be the norm and the consistent things about you, but reputation is making sure that those things continue to align with your habits and daily activities. I love that. So we're running out of time, but I wanted to actually ask you your top 3 best advice, the best advice either you've received or that you would give in all of the work you've done. You've done so much work in mentorship, working with entrepreneurs, building brands, and now actually speaking out about ageism, which I love and really appreciate. What are your top 3 pieces of advice?
Well, one of them doesn't come without peril a little bit, but I still am willing to give it. And that is be a truth teller. Be willing to just call out behavior that's bad, praise behavior that's good. Like it is far too many people, especially in my opinion, in the world of corporate America, are just afraid to say what they think. They're constantly judging, will my boss like what I'm going to say, or how will this be received? And even what we're seeing now in the cancel culture, people are, there's just too much falseness, I think, out there because people are a little bit afraid of saying what they think. So that would be my one piece of advice. Just find your voice and use it. And then, you know, I am going to go back to what we were talking about earlier, but only because it's just served me so well. And that is like, don't be so rigid with your life's plan that you sort of miss the tremendous opportunity that could be created by something that you didn't think about. So just be, you know, open-minded. I forget who it was that's, you know, I think it was Mark Twain had a great quote about, you know, open-minded so that every brilliant thing can go into your mind and allow you to do even more. And then I guess the third thing that I've tried to practice is, you know, it's, you know, I've been working for 41 years and some of those years were like pretty intense and pretty tough, but there was never a period of time where there wasn't some fun and some laughter and some friendships and some crazy ass experiences along the way. And it's just, I'm at the point in my career where I'm doing more reflecting, and it's like, oh, there've been so many of those. And I don't think I ever took myself too seriously to not be able to experience and enjoy the joy that comes from all of it. It's hard a lot of time, but there's also like a lot of joy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing. Everybody, Patty Temple Rock. This is a great name, by the way. Oh, Patty Temple Rocks. She's the author of I'm Still Not Done. It's a book about ageism in the workplace. Listen, where can they follow you? Sign up, pattytemplerocks.com.
Yep, that's it. And the book, my second book called I'm Still Not Done, is available as of this week. So on Amazon.
Oh, awesome. So everybody go check that out. Thank you so much, Patty, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.